access the mind of a good proofreader. So Reba, do you have anything you'd like to say before I start answering questions?
I'd like to say hello to everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I feel honored to be able to see everybody and talk to you. With publishing our music, we want to have as broad an audience as possible. And with anything that is going to be sold, you want the best looking, most professional type publication that you can have. And whenever I'm looking at something and I find a lot of grammatical errors or misspelled words, it kind of makes me question how professional a company is, or how much work that they have actually put into their products. And so I think proofreading, giving it to somebody else to look with a fresh pair of eyes is very important.
Thank you. Thanks. So that means that some of my publications are like, because I didn't have you proofread them. But so just a couple of questions. Do you start by looking at the whole page first and then narrowing down? Do you look at every single line? Do you have a systematic format, or is it more random? For me, it's more random, but how does your brain work?
I don't spot check at first. I start at the very beginning and I read and look at every single item. I read every single word. I check to make sure that things are spelled correctly. And then when I get to the music, I start at the very beginning. And one of the first things I check for is, does this piece of music have a pickup measure? If it does, then I immediately go to the end and see if the number of beats that are at the beginning have been subtracted from the very last measure. From there, I go back and check things like key signatures and time signatures. And as I look at the music, I kind of count the beats and the rhythm in my head, and I make sure that the left hand and right hand chords are going to fit together. After I go through, I look for places that might have problems with fingering, possibly where your fingers might bump together, or the line might not flow as easily as you'd like. And sometimes I'll take the music to the piano and I'll play through the melody, and I will use the chords that are written at the top of the staff and make sure that those chords fit with the melody line.
Okay, so so you're saying that you go one, you don't look at the whole page, you just look at one system at a time, or even one, do you go one measure at a time?
I usually go measure by measure, and then sometimes I'll go back. If something doesn't quite click right, I'll go back over it and see what is bothering me about that section.
So I think what I hear you saying, and I had this experience one time with my harp teacher, Jean Henderson. She was helping me proofread one of Beverly Myro's, you know, Beverly Myro was Natalie Billig's harp teacher. And we published some of her pop things, Getting to Know You and things like that. So I was at my harp teacher's, this was when she was in her late 80s. And she just kept looking at one measure and she just couldn't figure it out. She just kept looking at one measure. And I was getting a little frustrated because she was not unable to articulate why she was looking at this measure over and over again. And really after about 15 minutes, I looked at the measure and I went, I get it. And it was a matter of, in harp music, you know, we have to compartmentalize our beats. If it's in 4/4 and you've got a huge run of music, you have to compartmentalize by rhythm and by hand. Which hand is going to take what? And in this particular instance, there was a low C, and it was not part of the grouping that it needed to be for the hand. And so I was, and even my brother said, once a teacher, always a teacher. And he taught me that I, you know, that I need, if there's something, and just like what you said, Reba, if there's something that just doesn't look right, then that you just have to sit there and look at it and figure out if it doesn't look right, then there's something wrong with it, and you have to change
Right.
it. Mhm.
Yes.
I will unspotlight myself here. I was going to ask you, do you sometimes play through the music to help you if it looks suspect? And if you do play it, do you play it on the harp or on the piano? And why would you choose one over the other? I play it on the piano because it's easy to walk over and plunk on a piano. But what do you do?
Usually try and do both, but unlike you, piano was my first instrument, and so it's easier for me to play through on the piano and listen and think about what's going on. And it's different playing it on the harp. And so it's really good to get your fingers on the music to see how it lays under the fingers and exactly how the fingerings would work and break up the sections, you know, where you're going to place.
One thing I'm just watching the time here, but one thing I want to say is that there are a few harp arrangers who either arrange at the piano or they arrange at their computer.
Yes.
And when you play something back on the computer, it can sound wonderful.
Right.
But it doesn't always look good.
Yeah.
You know, you might write it at the computer in 6/8, but in reality, it's supposed to be 3/4. So a harpist sits down and looks at it and tries to play it and can't do it. And I was playing through a piece of music one time, and Karen McGarrett, who was Karen Amos at the time, she said to me, "Mary, you're a really good harpist, but you sound really bad when you're playing this music." And that, I had to let someone in. And sorry, I didn't see her. Hi, Valerie, sorry, I didn't see you waiting, but we are taping this, so. And so she just said to me, "You sound really bad." And she said, "That indicates to me that there's just something wrong with the music, because you never sound that bad, but you really sound terrible today when you're playing this." And what it was the music was very picky. The fingers were too close to each other. The fingers were just like on top of each other. So that is something that you have to look at also. Okay, so Reba, what are the kinds of things that pop out at you when you're looking? I mean, stuff pops out at me on occasion, like rests, but what pops out at you when you're looking at a piece of music and proofing it?
Since that there's also a choral background, the melody line and how it flows kind of pops out, and where you would actually, if you were singing it, stop and take a breath. And I look at that sort of thing to see how the line is flowing, and each piece of music actually is conveying a story to someone, and you want that story to be as clear and as easy to pick up on. And so melody line is very important, and then the supporting harmony. In harp music, I've noticed that the simpler the left-hand line is kept, the more the melody can sing out in that way. I do agree, because sometimes whenever we are writing or arranging things, we kind of get locked into a certain paradigm and we can't see alternatives. Someone else might look at it with a different pair of eyes or a different experience and say, oh, well, these notes could easily be picked up, even though they're melody line notes, you could pick it up with your left hand, or it's not really necessary to have this sort of harmony here. So it's just good to get other people's experience and ideas, because they may see things or pick up things that we hadn't even thought about.
Right, right. Okay.
And this is kind of one of the things that the way my mind works, whether I'm reading a book, whether I'm just reading something on the internet, whether I'm looking at a book, these little things that misspellings or grammatical errors just kind of just jump out at me.
So you see that the word weather is misspelled here. It's missing an H. So that's, yeah.
And so if I was looking at this company to sell my jewelry to, and I see a bunch of misspellings or a bunch of grammatical errors, I may not go there.
Now, this is a problem that Basil did not put in these double notes, but this is a very common thing that happens. Does everybody see where the blue line is? There's an E, which is the bottom note of the right hand, and an E, which is the top note of the left hand. Those are the same notes, and your fingers cannot play those at the same time. That's an extremely common thing to look for in harp music. And I just want to reiterate, Basil did not put this in this music. I just did this for demo purposes. So I just wanted to show that, okay?
But if somebody is sitting just at the computer going through Finale or Sibelius or another program and writing the music out on the computer, it's a very easy problem to insert, because
it doesn't show up on the way it sounds. It shows up on the way it plays.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so now we'll go to Sharon's. And like, I can't see anybody, but I will just go on. This is Sharon's PDF. First of all, there's a blank page here at the beginning, which we easily removed, but keep in mind that your pagination is important. A standard element of page design is that odd numbered pages are on the right, even numbered pages are on the left. So that's just standard. And so here we go, right here. So Reba, you want to just talk about this here?
Oh, these are just little picky things. There needs to be a comma between leg and especially, and proofreading should all be run together. Sometimes when I'm looking at things, I will go to the internet and I will look up words if things don't look right. I will look up theory questions instead of going to a book or whatever, because the internet is just such a good resource, and you can get 10 different versions of the same question to help yourself out.
And I actually looked up proofreading, and it used to be 2 words. Then it evolved into a hyphenated word, and now it evolved into the current preferred way to write the word proofreading as 1 word with no hyphen and no space. So, all right, so here we go, the Masquerade Waltz. So there's measure 3 is really what, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Measure
5.
5.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, one thing about this is when you edit music in your music program and you make edits or insertions, the software will throw off the measures. So you never rely on your software to keep track of your measures for you. And here we are. Reba, you want to talk about that?
I prefer to put page numbers at the bottom away from where the music is, because you see how that big 2 is just right up against the measure number 20. And somebody can look at that and go, what does that really mean?
Yeah, and people who are not familiar with music notation programs wouldn't get that. One thing I would like to talk right now about default page numbers. Because whenever you're writing a piece of music, your music notation program will put default page numbers on it. Now, if you're going to be putting that piece of music in a book, you have to remove the default page numbers, because if that particular song is on pages 48, 49, and 50, and you have your default page numbers on and it says 2, 3, 4, it's just such a conflict. So, and also, if you are going to be publishing a piece of music that's going to be on an 11 by 17 cardstock, you know, if it's just one piece of folded music, which like Rhett Barnwell has those, you got to remove those default page numbers, because you never know if it's going to be easier for the editor or publisher, and that would be me when I place that music into the program. Am I going to put page 1 on the left side, or am I going to put page 1 on the right side and page 2 on the back? Or am I going to use all 4 pages of that folded 11 by 17? And so if you've got default page numbers on, they're not going to match what I'm doing. I really, that's one of my pet peeves, is default page numbers. Because when they're there in Acrobat Pro, I can delete them sometimes. Sometimes I cannot delete them. And sometimes they skew the entire page. So please delete your default page numbers. I mean, I think that's such a super important thing.
And that brings up another question. Do you count the title page as page 1, or do you actually start the page numbers where the music begins and the introduction and all the written stuff is just extra, or Roman numeral small 1, 2, 3, etc.?
Years and years ago, when I first started working with PageMaker, your first page, what like your covers didn't count. Your covers are separate, but your first page is page 1. And then if page 2 is a blank page, that's page 2. If page 2 is your table of contents, that's page 3. So that's how the old PageMaker used to work. I'm not sure how InDesign works. I have an old version of InDesign, but we don't make books like that anymore because of Acrobat, because of Adobe Acrobat that has changed everything. But that's how it used to be. And I kind of prefer it that way. I don't have a problem with that.
So as long as the index of music lines up with the actual page numbers of the music, then it's okay.
Yeah, you got to remember that your table of contents has to line up, right? So your raw file is Finale, Sibelius, Personal Composer, MuseScore, Encore, whatever that is. Some people hire someone to do their typesetting. And what happens is, admitting someone else to the room, what happens is, please, if you hire someone to do your typesetting for you, get those raw files, store them on your computer, because I can't tell you how much valuable music has been lost because the artist, the person who did the arrangements, handed the typesetting over to someone else to do the typesetting for them. And the typesetter provided them with PDF files, yay. And 5 years later, you want to make some changes. So the typesetter, you don't have the files. The typesetter has the files on their computer, but they got a different computer. Their old computer is in their basement. They can't boot it up anymore because it doesn't work. So you've lost all of your valuable raw files because it's on someone else's computer. Get your raw files from the person who's doing the work for you. They are yours. It's your intellectual property. You have to have those raw files.
It's also good to have a paper copy to go
Yes.
back to in case
yes.
that there's any question of the copyright.
Right. So anyway, that's that. Okay, now let's go on. That was my spiel about right here. So we're going to go on with Sharon's book. Thank you again, Sharon, for letting us use your book. There weren't too many problems here. This
Right.
is what we even noticed here.
I think that on the first page, there's a bum, 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 bum in the left hand, and it's very reminiscent of a lot of Latin type music bass line. And so it's very good. It moves the music forward. On page 2, the bass line changes a little bit. And I think that that is also very good because after a while, if it's the same thing over and over, your mind may kind of just go on automatic. So you need something a little bit different to open it up, to wake it up. And that's also why people will do a second run through of the melody, possibly an octave up, just so it doesn't sound the same and it keeps the mind engaged.
Thank you. Thanks, Reba. That's right. That's right. Okay. Like I said, there weren't very many things in here, but here's something interesting.
And that's just a picky little thing. Set G sharp an octave above middle C, which just gives a little bit more direction.
Okay.
And the winter L, that L, that's actually probably in the font, but it looks a little odd. So you might check the font as you're doing something.
Right. And you know, I as far as fonts goes, for a while back there, here's a typo, misspelled word. But for a while back when when Adobe Acrobat was first coming out, I had an issue with fonts. And so I told everybody, please just use Times New Roman. Times does not work. Don't use Times. Use Times New Roman, TNR, the best font ever. It works with everything. Okay,
Yeah.
so Reba, here we go. Yeah.
This is
Mhm.
pickup measure again.
Yeah.
And
Pickup measure is not considered measure 1. Your first full
Right.
measure is considered measure 1. So easy. And your music notation program will always count your pickup measure as measure 1. You have to change that yourself. And what do we have here?
okay, pickup measure, but there are 6 beats in the very last one. So you need to take away 1 to account for the 1 in the pickup measure.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Same thing, the program is off again because it has counted the pickup measure as the first measure.
All notation programs do that. Just a few little changes in the way the paragraph is written.
Right.
So I think that really there's not much more. Rejuvenation, I don't, my spelling is atrocious, so I wouldn't have noticed that.
That's why it's good to have a fresh pair of eyes look at
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
There is a book.
I just have a few comments. One of the things I'm sure Reba can identify with is, particularly when arranging your own music, your mind will autocorrect things. That is, you don't see obvious errors sometimes, because you've been staring at it. Your mind knows what you want to hear. And so you might have a wrong note, but you play it correctly because that's what your brain wants to hear.
Yes.
It's a common problem, which is why it's really important to have somebody else play through your music who is also a harpist or harper, because I find this is a perpetual problem. And you can be staring at something for weeks or months as you're arranging it and not see the obvious because of this problem. And it seems to be the bane of all composers. Friends of mine who compose other types of music say the same thing goes on with them. So that's why it's really important to have somebody else proofread. And sometimes when they give me their corrections, it'll be one of these, head slappers. It's like, how could I not have seen that? Realizing it's because my mind was auto-correcting it.
And I'm throwing this
Yes.
out to everybody, the rest controversy. We're real picky when we are classically trained pianists about having the notation correct, the rests, etc. But at times as harpists, rests are not always put into the music. They're just kind of assumed that people will understand and apply them correctly.
Anyone?
Do you mean
I
rest
I
or
would like to say something. We can put a rest in, but if you don't stop down the string, there is no rest. It continues with a nice sound, actually.
Yes. So the rest will also help to know where to damp some of the music.
So we should damp them at that moment. Oh,
I think I know what you're saying, that, in piano music, all we have to do as a pianist is lift up our hand and the duration or the resonance stops.
Right.
But on the harp,
Pedal.
in order to have the resonance stop, you've got to dampen. And I personally think that that's a whole nother
yeah, thing.
I just think that that's a whole nother, we could have a whole nother discussion on that.
Yeah,
I had a student that brought that up to me the other day, and I just said, oh, not today. We'll talk about that another time. It's just, damping is just, it's an art. It takes a lot of coordination, and you have to be playing for a long time to be able to damp comfortably. And it's also very intuitive. So the question there would be, how can I, as a harpist, recognize that this is a rest and I should not damp here? Or how can I, as a harpist, recognize that this is a rest? And yes, I do need to damp here. It's could be really a tricky question. And so it's very intuitive. And let's save that that's really, Ida, that's a great, Ida and Reba, you brought that up. That's a great topic for another webinar.
Thank
Thank you.
I have a question, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, hi. I am a harp teacher in Pennsylvania, and 10 years ago I was hired to have my harp ensemble perform in front of a Pops orchestra out here, and I didn't have resources, so I orchestrated some very popular harp duets. Like I did the what is it? The Jane Weidensaul. I did stuff by Janet Whitman, and I orchestrated about 6 or 7 pieces of commonly done Christmas harp ensemble music with the orchestra. It went well. I composed some of my own stuff. How do you even start thinking about getting your things published? Who do I approach? And what about the copyrights on like me? I've talked to Janet Whitman and told her, I orchestrated some of your stuff. Is it okay? And she said, fine. But I did one of Alfredo Ortiz's pieces and orchestrated it. And he said, it's fine as long as you give me credit. But is there a copyright process for me approaching people?
As I was invited to play, I don't give concerts. I play for worship. And playing for worship, the copyright rules are different from giving a public performance. So I spent months researching music copyrights. I learned a lot, and what I learned is that for Canadians, recently I learned this through one of Deborah Henson Conant's Free Thursdays. Canadian provinces each have their own copyright rules. And copyright is so complicated. So two things. I'm wondering, would anyone be willing to speak on this? What happens with copyright? You don't want to publish on it because if you publish and you're wrong, that's bad. So harpists who published, essays don't write about copyrights because you tell people the wrong thing. As an editor, I just look up everything I can find on copyrights. So maybe there's a way this group could get together in the future to explore this.
Copyright goes, Julia, a lot of people have taken some of my music and made it into combos, and I say the same thing with Alfredo or Janet. I don't care what you can arrange it, you can record it. I don't care. Just give me credit for it because I don't have time to carry out the business end of that. I would have to keep track of how long your recording is or how many pages your arrangement is. I don't want to do that. And you're going to find a lot of people just don't want to do that and they don't care and they're going to give you their blessing. But you're going to find that some people won't.
Okay. Well, I was wondering because the arrangement I did of Alfredo's Jingle Bells actually kind of took off and the orchestra got crazy. I had broken my leg and I was on Vicodin at the time. And the trombones started getting crazy. And then the whole orchestra started putting in all these children's songs. So the orchestration became really crazy, but it's appropriate for like an 8th grade or 9th grade orchestra. And I was like, I should publish this, but I based it on Alfredo's harp parts for Jingle Bells. So I talked to him about it and he was like, oh, just give me credit. But at the same time, I haven't done anything with it because I'm like, I'm just not sure. It's such a gray area.
I have a question on a slightly different topic.
Okay.
I'm Valerie. I'm up in the mountains in Colorado and it's a snowstorm right now.
That's lovely.
So I play a lot of ancient music and I learn a lot of it by ear from different sources. And then I do my own arrangements for myself and students or like 1, 2, 3 voices, whatever. And for example, with the Irish music, the jigs, you really cannot write those in English notation. And some of the ancient music is a little bit different also. So have you guys, I know different people try different approaches to jot down jigs and then you kind of have to know what the code is. Do you guys have any ideas on this? Have you come up with great things? And also things like sometimes people will like, I'm studying the Robert ap Hugh manuscript from Wales and it's a tablature that's pretty phenomenal. But in modern notation, sometimes you'll see little symbols for striking with the nails or, do you guys, has anyone done a dictionary of this stuff or do you guys have any cool suggestions about unusual notation?
Are you talking about a dictionary of techniques
No,
that are used?
notations, tablature. And if I were going to use that, I would just use Robert ap Hughes, I think, because it's brilliant. But no, like when you look at tune settings of some of the ethnic music, like jigs are such an easy example to pick on. They're often written as paired 8th notes, but they're really not. They're neither an 8th note nor a 16th note nor a dotted anything. It's like something altogether different. And so if you learn them,
No, Mary, I just wanted to make a comment about notation. All notation really is approximate because It's kind of based on the Western classical music half-step system. And thank you for spotlighting me. If you're trying to notate, for example, music from India or someplace that uses quarter tones or has a rhythmic construct that's very different than what we're used to, we're only approximating the notation. I think sometimes what we have to do is use standard notation because it is recognized worldwide as the standard for notating written music. And then with a note of explanation, where you might have to say, well, for this piece, you might need to use scordatura tuning, or you might need to tune your B as a quarter tone. I think we would have to have an explanation because, if somebody started using notation constructs that were really far out, people wouldn't want to buy your music because it wouldn't be easily accessible to them. I don't know that there's any ideal way of notating, particularly the old Celtic tunes or medieval music. That's a prime example where, they were using just tuning and not even tempered tuning. So those are just my thoughts on it.
Okay,
Well, also, the Historical Harp Society probably could be a resource for this because they play only early music. They're not interested in contemporary music at all. And the way to find out what they think about music notation is to join the Historical Harp Society so you receive their bulletins. I do believe that they are a resource for how to handle early music notation. And Robert Hugh Bowen maybe did something with, I'm mixed up, Robin Bowen,
Robin.
maybe. There's one historical harpist who did something with the Hugh, I can't say it properly, that,
Ocean Ellis. Ocean Ellis has.
well, there's a current one too. There's
The
one,
Robert F. Hugh manuscript.
yeah, and there's a harpist who very recently interpreted and published, that might have been William Taylor, I don't remember. No, I also
Taylor-
wondered, Mary and Reba,
Bill
whether
Taylor
this,
teaches that manuscript. You can
would
study
this
it with him.
recording be available so we could watch it?
yes, I'm recording it now. Just real briefly, Nancy Vick Clark wanted to know acceptable music notation programs. That could be a whole topic unto itself, right, Darren? Acceptable music notation programs. Real briefly, Finale, Sibelius, MuseScore is free. And MuseScore is not bad. I think it's great. There's a whole MuseScore community. I joined, it costs $30 a month. You can download music that is that's not in public domain. It is great. I download music there for my piano students all the time. And then Angie Bemis is talking about copyright. So, we could probably just have all kinds of discussions.
And there's a whole lot of information that everybody has shared and so many different topics that we could all explore. So it's great feedback that you've all given.
Yeah, thank you. And Reba, thank you so much for being my first spotlighted person. And I appreciate you very much and miss that you don't come to work every day.
I miss you too.
Oh.